Chapter 1. The Mysterious Note. Lena had always been a creature of habit. Her life was predictable, simple yet fulfilling. A steady job at the local bookstore, evenings spent reading or meeting with friends for casual dinners, and weekends filled with trips to the farmers market and art galleries. She didn't mind it, even though some would call it boring. For her it was peaceful. But little did she know that her perfectly organized life was about to be upended in a way she could never have imagined. It started on a crisp Friday morning, when she arrived at work early, as usual. She unlocked the bookstore door, the familiar scent of paper and dust greeting her like an old friend. It was still dark outside, and the only light came from the soft glow of the streetlights filtering through the shop's large front windows. Lena set down her bag and began to set up for the day, flipping through the stacks of new arrivals. But then something caught her eye. There, tucked between two books on the front counter, was an envelope. It was unmarked, except for a single name written in bold, elegant handwriting: Lena. There was no return address, no indication of who it was from. It was just there. Curious but cautious, she picked it up and opened it carefully. Inside was a single piece of cream-colored paper. The words were written in the same elegant script. "Meet me at the old coffee shop on Willow Street at 7 p.m. tonight. You won't regret it." No signature, no explanation, just the cryptic message. Her pulse quickened. She wasn't one to entertain mysteries, especially ones that came out of nowhere. But the note left her with an inexplicable feeling, one of both intrigue and hesitation. Who could have sent this? And why? Lena spent the rest of the day distracted. She couldn't stop thinking about the note, the strange sensation it stirred in her. The bookstore was relatively quiet for a Friday, and she spent most of her time rearranging the shelves and pondering what to do. Was it a prank, a mistake, or something else entirely? As evening approached, Lena found herself standing by the door, staring out into the dusky streets. She had been debating with herself all day, whether to go or not, whether to dismiss it as foolish or give in to the feeling that this was something important. Finally, curiosity won over. At 6:45 p.m., she locked up the store, grabbed her coat, and made her way to Willow Street. Chapter 2. The Coffee Shop Meeting. The walk to Willow Street felt longer than it should have. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she made her way through the empty streets, the cool evening air doing little to calm the rising excitement and unease within her. The town was quiet, the sound of her boots clicking against the pavement the only noise she could hear as she moved through the shadows. The lamp posts cast long, ghostly shapes, and the city felt more unfamiliar than usual. Willow Street wasn't far from the bookstore, just a short walk down the block, but tonight it seemed as if the distance stretched on forever. Lena kept glancing at the clock on her phone, noticing the time creeping closer to 7 p.m. She had no idea what she was expecting. Maybe someone she knew, maybe a stranger with a message, maybe nothing at all. But the feeling in her gut, a strange mix of thrill and apprehension, told her this wasn't something she could just ignore. She arrived at the old coffee shop a few minutes before 7. It had been there for as long as Lena could remember, a quaint little building with faded blue awnings and a cozy, welcoming charm. The windows were fogged up, the warm golden light spilling out into the street, making it look inviting despite its age. The sign above the door read, "Willow Cafe" in delicate, faded lettering. Lena hesitated for a moment, her hand resting on the door handle. She wasn't sure what exactly she was doing here, but something about the place felt different tonight. It was as if the cafe was a portal to something entirely new. She pushed the door open. The sound of the bell above the door jingled softly as she entered, and immediately, the comforting aroma of coffee and freshly baked pastries enveloped her. The interior was just as charming as she remembered. A mix of mismatched chairs, vintage lamps, and bookshelves lining the walls, creating a cozy lived-in atmosphere. It was the kind of place that made you feel at home the moment you stepped inside. There were only a few customers scattered around, their hushed conversations blending with the soft jazz playing in the background. But what caught Lena's eye was a man sitting at a corner table, a cup of coffee in front of him. His back was to the door, but she could see the outline of his dark hair and the broadness of his shoulders. There was something about him, something familiar yet foreign, that made her pulse quicken. For a moment she stood still, her hand still gripping the door as if it might close on its own and give her an excuse to leave. But the man turned, catching sight of her. His face was calm, almost unreadable, but his eyes, their deep, intense blue, locked onto hers with an unsettling certainty. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile before gesturing for her to sit. Lena's feet moved before her mind could catch up. She found herself walking toward him, her heart pounding harder with each step. What was happening? Who was this man? What was he going to say? She reached the table and sat down without a word. The man didn't immediately speak either. Instead, he studied her for a moment, his gaze soft yet piercing, like he was trying to read something in her expression. The silence between them felt thick, charged with unspoken tension. Then finally he spoke. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice low but steady. There was something almost magnetic about it, something that made her feel like he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "I know this must seem strange to you." Lena nodded slowly, her lips pressed together as she tried to find her voice. She wasn't sure how to start. She had so many questions. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice a little sharper than she intended. "And why did you leave me that note?" The man's lips curved into a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm someone who knows you better than you realize, Lena," he said, his words measured, as though carefully chosen. "I know it's all very confusing right now, but if you'll allow me, I'll explain everything." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Explain? I don't even know where to begin with what's happening here. I've never seen you before in my life." He paused, taking a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. When he set the cup down, he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You've seen me before," he said quietly, his gaze unwavering. "We've met many times." Lena's confusion deepened. "What are you talking about?" she asked, leaning forward. "I don't know you. I swear I don't." The man's expression softened slightly, and there was a trace of regret in his eyes. "You don't remember," he said, almost as if to himself. "But I remember everything. Every detail." Lena's heart began to race as a strange sense of déjà vu washed over her. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She was suddenly flooded with images, familiar places, a soft touch, the scent of a different coffee shop, long-forgotten laughter. It was like the pieces of a puzzle were floating just out of reach, begging to come together but refusing to fall into place. The man leaned forward slightly. "Lena, I'm not a stranger to you. We've shared more than you realize. And I'm here now to make sure you remember. You deserve to know the truth." The air around them seemed to thicken with the weight of his words, and for the first time that evening, Lena felt a sense of urgency that she couldn't explain. There was something in his eyes, something she couldn't ignore. "I'm here to help you remember who you really are," he said softly. "And what you mean to me." Chapter 3. The Forgotten Past. Lena's mind raced, her thoughts a jumbled mess. She had barely processed the man's words before another surge of unfamiliar memories seemed to bubble up within her, teasing the edge of her consciousness like a half-forgotten dream. She shook her head, trying to clear it, but it was no use. His eyes held something intense, something that pulled at the very core of her, something that felt real, something she had once known. "You keep saying we've shared something before, but I don't remember," Lena whispered, her voice barely audible, as though speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile reality of the moment. "What do you mean by that?" The man leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression that seemed to hold both sorrow and hope. He looked as though he were making a decision in his mind, weighing something heavy. Finally, after a long silence, he spoke again. "I know this is hard to believe," he said slowly, "but I'm not just some stranger walking into your life. We were once very close, Lena. In another life, in another time." Lena's head spun. Another life. Another time. What was he talking about? Before she could voice her confusion, he continued. We were together before. In a past you don't remember. A life you've forgotten. But I've been waiting for you to remember. For you to come back to me. The words struck her like a lightning bolt, and her hands trembled slightly on the table. What are you saying? She asked again, her voice a mix of disbelief and growing unease. Are you telling me that we were what? Together. In a past life. A reincarnation. What's going on here? The man's gaze softened, and for the first time, a sadness appeared in his eyes. It's not a past life, Lena. Not in the way you think. We were together in a different version of this world. A world where things were different, where everything was different. We loved each other. We built a life together. But something happened. Something tragic. Something that caused you to forget it all. Lena recoiled slightly, a mixture of skepticism and fear welling up in her chest. Her thoughts tumbled over one another, each one trying to make sense of the situation. Could this be real? Could she have lived a different life with this man? That sounds insane, she murmured, her mind struggling to catch up with the flood of words. I don't remember any of this. I don't even know you. The man leaned forward again, his expression pleading. Lena, please. I know it sounds crazy, but everything I'm saying is true. I don't have time to explain all the details right now, but I need you to believe me. The memories will come back. They have to. She shook her head, unable to suppress the frustration that bubbled to the surface. How can I believe you? If you truly knew me, then why are you telling me this now, like it's some kind of fairy tale? The man closed his eyes briefly, as if steeling himself for something. When he opened them again, the weight of his words seemed heavier. I'm telling you now because I can't stand seeing you in pain anymore. There's something happening, something beyond our control. A force that's pushing us together again, forcing us to face what was lost, what was taken from us. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Taken from us. Yes, he said, his voice barely a whisper. You were ripped from me, from everything we built. But I've been waiting for you. All this time. Lena didn't know what to say. The room felt smaller now, like the air had thickened. She could almost feel the weight of his words in her chest, but her rational mind was screaming for her to reject it all. This isn't real, she told herself. This is crazy. She stood up suddenly, shaking her head. I can't do this. I don't know who you are and I don't know what you want from me, but this is too much. I need to leave. But as she turned to walk away, she froze. Something tugged at the back of her mind, a flicker, like a memory trying to break through. She gripped the edge of the table, her hands shaking, and closed her eyes for a moment, willing herself to steady her breath. Wait, the man said quietly, his voice softer now. You have to know one thing before you go. Lena didn't move, even though every part of her wanted to leave. She stayed, almost against her will, turning slowly to face him. He stood up now, and for the first time she noticed how tall he was. His presence was commanding, but not in an overpowering way. It was the kind of strength that came from knowing something deep, something only he understood. I'm not going to ask you to remember everything right now, he said. But there's one thing I need you to know. The person who you think you are, Lena, that's not the person you were meant to be. You were meant to be with me. And I'll never stop trying to remind you of that. The words hit her like a wave, pulling her under. She felt a rush of emotions. Fear, confusion, something else that felt like a whisper of recognition. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she wanted to run or if she wanted to stay and hear more. But before she could say anything, the man stepped forward. His expression desperate but gentle. I know you don't remember, he said softly. But we have time. Time for you to find your way back to me. Lena opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't understand. None of it made sense. But there was something in his eyes, something in the air, that told her this wasn't just a fantasy. This was real. And she was about to uncover a truth that would change everything. Chapter 4. A fractured memory. Lena stood there for a long moment, unsure of what to do. Her mind was a whirlwind, spinning with thoughts and emotions she could hardly control. The man's words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Something about his presence, his conviction, made her feel like she was standing on the edge of an abyss, a place where the lines between reality and memory blurred in a way that terrified and captivated her at the same time. The silence between them stretched on, only broken by the soft hum of the cafe's background music. It was as if the world had stopped spinning, leaving them suspended in a moment where everything felt like it was both too much and not enough. The man's gaze was steady, almost pleading, but he didn't push her to respond. Instead, he just waited, his eyes softening with a quiet understanding, as if he knew how hard it was for her to even consider what he was saying. Finally, Lena spoke, her voice a little shaky but determined. "I don't understand what you're saying. I don't remember you. I don't remember us. How could I have forgotten something like this?" His expression shifted, and she saw a flicker of sadness cross his face. "It's not your fault," he said gently. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. You weren't meant to forget. Someone made sure of it." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "Made sure of it," she repeated, her voice rising. "What do you mean? Who would do something like that?" He took a deep breath, as if gathering the strength to explain. "I don't know exactly who, but I have my suspicions. There's a force, something dark, that keeps pulling us apart. It's been trying to erase our past, our connection, for years. I've fought to remember, to keep track of the little pieces of our life together, but it hasn't been easy." Lena felt a chill crawl up her spine. A dark force. She shook her head, the words too foreign, too strange. "This is insane," she whispered. "None of this makes sense. I don't know what you're talking about." The man's gaze never wavered. "I understand that this is hard to accept. But everything I'm telling you is true. There's more at play here than you realize. Your memories, our memories, are locked away for a reason. And I can't explain why, not completely. But I do know one thing, we have a second chance. We've been given another opportunity to be together, to live the life we were meant to." Lena felt a knot in her stomach. Her mind screamed at her to walk away, to dismiss the whole situation as a bizarre, twisted dream. But there was something deep inside her, a feeling she couldn't quite name, that told her she couldn't just ignore this. There was a connection between them, something undeniable, something that went beyond logic and reason. "Why now?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you telling me this now, after all this time? Why not sooner?" The man's expression softened, and for the first time, a vulnerability flickered in his eyes. "Because," he said quietly, "I couldn't reach you before. But now I finally can. The time has come for you to remember who you truly are. To remember us." Lena's heart ached at the raw honesty in his voice. Despite the confusion, despite the madness of it all, she felt a pull. A deep magnetic pull toward him. She wanted to believe him. But how could she? How could she trust him when everything about this situation screamed impossibility? "You said we were together before," Lena said, trying to ground herself in the small details she could hold on to. "In a different world, a different version of things. How do you know that? What's the proof?" The man looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I don't have proof. Not yet. But I know what we were. I know the love we shared. I remember everything, Lena, every second we spent together. And I'll never stop trying to help you remember, no matter what." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The silence between them was thick with unspoken emotions, with questions that Lena couldn't yet answer. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Then, a soft sigh escaped her lips. "If what you're saying is true, if we really did share something, then why did I forget? Why would someone make me forget?" The man's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Lena thought she saw a flicker of anger behind them. "I don't know," he said, his voice low. "But I've been searching for the answer. I've been looking for clues, for anything that could explain why this is happening. I don't have all the answers yet, but I promise you this. I won't stop until I find them." Lena felt a wave of emotion crash over her. She didn't know what to think. She didn't know what was real anymore. But as she looked into his eyes, she could see the desperation, the hope that had kept him fighting all this time. He wasn't lying. He wasn't trying to deceive her. He believed every word he was saying. For the first time, Lena felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of hope. She had no idea where this journey would take her, or what the truth really was. But one thing was clear. This man, this stranger who seemed so familiar, wasn't just someone from a past life. He was someone she needed to understand. Someone she needed to remember. "I don't know what's going to happen next," Lena said slowly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But if we really were together before, if we really have a chance to find our way back to each other, then I'm willing to try. I need to know the truth." The man's expression softened, and for the first time, a genuine smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I know this isn't easy, but I promise you, Lena, I will never stop fighting for us." As Lena sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the cafe, she felt something shift inside her, a small but undeniable pull toward the mystery unfolding before her. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. Her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. And it was just the beginning. Chapter 5. Unveiling the Past. Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break wide open, something she hadn't even begun to comprehend. The man, his name still eluded her despite everything he'd shared, wasn't just some mysterious figure. There was history between them. Real history. And no matter how hard she tried to dismiss it, the sense of familiarity and connection she felt toward him was undeniable. She stood up slowly, her mind still reeling from everything he'd told her. She needed space to think. Process. I think I need some time," Lena said, the words leaving her mouth before she could stop them. The man nodded, his expression both understanding and resigned. He stepped back slightly, giving her the space she requested, but his eyes never left her. "I understand. Take all the time you need. But please don't shut me out. Not now." Lena forced a smile, though it felt shaky at best. "I won't," she said. But as she turned to walk away, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was doing exactly that, shutting him out. Shutting out the truth. The cool evening air hit her as she stepped outside, and she walked aimlessly, not really knowing where she was going. Her thoughts felt like they were moving in 1,000 different directions, none of them settling long enough for her to make sense of what was happening. She thought about what the man had said. "We were together before." She couldn't remember it. She couldn't even begin to understand how that was possible. Yet, there was this overwhelming pull deep within her that told her it was true. She felt a longing she couldn't explain, a tugging at her heart that felt as if it had been waiting for her to recognize it. But who was he? Her mind demanded. "Why can't I remember?" Lena's footsteps led her to a small park, the soft rustle of leaves in the evening breeze filling the silence. She sat on a bench trying to clear her mind, but the questions kept coming. Over and over again. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out, surprised to see a text message from an unknown number. It was simple, just a single line of text. "I know who you are." Her heart skipped a beat. She felt the weight of the message, the implications of it. She hadn't told anyone about the man, not even her closest friends. Yet here was a text, from someone who seemed to know exactly what was going on. Lena stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the reply button. She should be cautious, right? But there was something in the message, something familiar about it, that made her hesitate. She typed back, fingers trembling. "Who is this?" The reply came almost immediately. "The one who has answers. The one who can help you remember everything." Lena stared at the screen for a long time, feeling a shiver run down her spine. Her thoughts raced, and she looked around the park, suddenly feeling as though she were being watched. She didn't know why, but the message felt like a warning, a clue, or perhaps a danger. "I'm not ready for this," she typed back. "How do you know me?" The message came a second time, even quicker than before. "You will be soon enough. You've already taken the first step." Lena's heart raced. What did that mean? The first step. What step had she taken? She thought about the man at the cafe, the strange feelings he had stirred inside her. What was happening to her? What was this life she was stumbling through? Before she could type another response, the phone buzzed again. But this time the message was different. It was a photo, fuzzy, unclear, but Lena knew immediately what it was. It was her. And standing beside her, with his arm around her, was the man from the cafe. Lena's breath hitched, her fingers going cold as she stared at the image. It was blurry, old, faded. But it was undeniably her. In a different place, a different time. Her pulse quickened as she looked at the photo, the realization crashing down on her like a wave. She knew this person. She had known him. Somehow, someway she had been with him before. And this was proof. She quickly scrolled through her phone, searching for any details. A name, an address, a clue. Anything that might make sense of this. But the phone was empty. There was no additional text, no explanation. Just the image. Lena felt sick. Everything felt too surreal, too twisted. Was she losing her mind? The wind picked up, and she glanced up at the darkening sky. Her mind spinning with too many possibilities. She couldn't go back to the cafe yet. She couldn't face him. Not after what she had just seen. She needed answers, real answers, and she had no idea where to find them. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from the same number. "Meet me at midnight. I'll show you what you've been searching for." Lena hesitated. Part of her wanted to run, to block the number and ignore everything that had happened. But another part of her, the part that had felt a pull toward the man, the part that felt something deep within her, knew that this was the only way forward. She couldn't keep running from the truth. Not anymore. She typed back quickly, her hands trembling. "Where?" The reply was simple. "The old library, near the docks." Lena's heart raced. The old library was a place she hadn't thought about in years. She hadn't even realized it was still standing. It was an eerie, forgotten part of the city, long abandoned by most, except for those who had a reason to be there. Lena knew she had no choice. She had to go. Something inside her told her that this meeting, this step, was the key to unlocking everything, to finding the truth. With one final glance at the park around her, she stood up, a mix of fear and anticipation swirling within her chest. She didn't know what awaited her at the old library, but she knew one thing. Her life was about to change. Again. And this time she was ready. Chapter 6. The Library of Lost Memories. Lena's pulse raced as she made her way through the city streets. The message from the mysterious number still lingered in her mind. "Meet me at midnight. I'll show you what you've been searching for." The old library was no more than a few blocks away from her apartment, but the night felt colder, emptier than she ever remembered. It was as if the world itself had grown silent, watching her every move. The streets were nearly deserted, the only sound being the distant hum of traffic and the rustling of wind in the trees. As Lena approached the library, her steps slowed, an unfamiliar chill creeping into her bones. The building loomed ahead, its tall, dark silhouette casting a shadow across the empty street. The windows were dark, most of the glass cracked or boarded up. It looked abandoned, forgotten by time. Yet, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to unfold here, something that would change everything. She reached the front steps, the old wooden door slightly ajar, creaking as the wind pushed it open. The smell of dust and old paper wafted out, a scent so familiar that it brought a strange sense of nostalgia. A memory, her memory, drifted to the surface, fleeting and fragmented. She shook it off. Now was not the time to lose herself in pieces of a past she didn't understand. Taking a deep breath, Lena pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was darker than she expected, the only light coming from a dim, flickering lamp in the corner of the room. The shelves, once filled with books, were now empty, the pages of some long since turned to dust. The floors creaked beneath her feet as she moved deeper into the library. A sense of foreboding settled over her, but she pressed forward, knowing that answers waited in the shadows. The man's words echoed in her mind. "I'll show you what you've been searching for." Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the decaying remnants of what had once been a sanctuary for knowledge and stories. But there was no one here, no sign of the mysterious person who had sent her the text. The anticipation, the dread, coiled tighter in her chest. Suddenly, the door behind her slammed shut with a force that made her jump. Lena spun around, her heart hammering in her chest, but the door was just as silent as before. Her mind raced. She wasn't alone. She could feel it. A soft voice interrupted the silence, so quiet that it was barely audible. "You made it." Lena's breath hitched, and she whipped around, trying to locate the source of the voice. There, standing in the far corner of the library, was a figure cloaked in shadows. She could just make out the outline of a person, a man, his features obscured by the dim light. "Who are you?" Lena demanded, her voice trembling slightly. She wasn't sure if it was fear or something else that made her hesitate. The man stepped forward, and for a brief moment, the dim light revealed his face. It was him, the man from the cafe. Her heart skipped a beat. But this time, his expression was not one of warmth or tenderness. It was darker, more intense, like he had been waiting for her to come, to walk into this moment. There was no trace of hesitation in his movements as he approached her, his eyes locking onto hers with an unsettling certainty. "You shouldn't have come," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight she couldn't quite understand. "Not yet. But it's too late now." Lena took a step back, a sudden wave of doubt crashing over her. "What do you mean? What's going on? Who are you really?" The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at her with a deep sadness in his eyes, as if there was something he was burdened by, something he couldn't share yet. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old yellowed photograph. He held it up to her, and for a moment she saw it. It was the same image from her phone, the blurred picture of them together. But there was something different now. The background was clearer, the place she couldn't remember standing out. She took a shaky breath. "Why are you showing me this? What does this mean?" The man lowered the photo, and his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "This is what we had," he said softly. "This is what we were. But it's not just the past, Lena. It's the present, too." She blinked in confusion. "The present? I don't understand." He stepped closer to her, the weight of his gaze pressing down on her like a physical force. "The truth is that we're not just bound by time. Our connection goes deeper than that. You've forgotten, but we've lived through this over and over again. Our memories, our love, it's been erased. Each time they take it from us, but we keep coming back, trying to find each other. The cycle has to end, Lena." Lena's mind was reeling, the words crashing over her like waves. "Cycles, memories, love erased." She shook her head, trying to clear the confusion. I don't remember any of that." The man's eyes softened, but there was still a hint of something darker behind them. "I know, but it's starting to come back, slowly, piece by piece. You're starting to remember, aren't you?" Lena felt a chill run down her spine. He was right. There was something inside her, a flicker of recognition, a pulse of something that wasn't just familiarity, but something deeper. She couldn't deny it anymore. Her connection to him, to this place, it was real. But how? Why? "I don't know how," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know why any of this is happening." The man stepped closer, reaching out to touch her arm. His fingers were cold, but his touch was gentle. "I'm here to help you, Lena. You don't have to remember everything at once. But you have to trust me. We can end the cycle. Together." The room felt smaller, closing in around them. Lena's chest tightened as the weight of his words sank in. Was this real? Was she really trapped in some endless loop? And if she was, how could she break free? The man seemed to read her thoughts. There's someone that wants to keep us apart. It's why you've forgotten. It's why I've had to search for you again and again. But this time is different. This time we're not running. We're standing our ground. Lena took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. How do we fight this? How do we stop it? The man's gaze darkened. We'll find the one who's been pulling the strings. We'll stop them before they erase us again. And with those words, the true journey began. The battle to uncover the truth. The fight to reclaim their lost love. And the discovery of something far more dangerous than either of them could have anticipated. Chapter 7. The Unseen Enemy. Lena's mind was spinning. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, to demand answers from this man who claimed to know so much, yet was so unwilling to share. But in that moment, all she could do was stare at him, hoping that the pieces of this twisted puzzle would finally come together. She had no choice but to trust him. To trust that whatever this was, the strange pull toward him, the flash of recognition in her heart, it all had meaning. But what was the truth? And who was the mysterious enemy he spoke of? He watched her silently, waiting for her response, his hand still hovering near her arm. His touch was cold, but there was a warmth in his eyes that made Lena feel safe, even as the tension in the room mounted. It was clear. Things were about to escalate. "Who is trying to stop us?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Her breath hitched as she thought about what she might be getting herself into. The man hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. Finally he spoke, his voice low and filled with gravity. "There's someone who doesn't want us to remember, Lena. They've been erasing our memories for years, wiping out every trace of us, every connection we've had, every life we've lived. They fear what we could become if we ever truly remember. And now they're hunting us." A chill ran down her spine. It was hard to comprehend what he was saying. How could memories be erased? How could they have been through this cycle over and over without even realizing it? "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are we remembering now?" His gaze darkened and he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Because we're getting closer. Every time we get close to the truth, they intervene. But this time it's different. We've broken through. Your memories, your past, they're resurfacing. The cycle is almost over, but not without a fight." Lena's heart pounded in her chest. She felt an overwhelming mix of fear and determination. Something deep inside her wanted to believe him, to accept this new reality, but she couldn't fully trust it. Not yet. Not without knowing more. "Who are they? And what do they want with us?" she asked, feeling a spark of defiance. The man took a deep breath, his expression pained. "I wish I could tell you everything, Lena. But there's so much at play here. We've lived through different lives, different identities. The people who are erasing our memories, they are the ones who control this reality. They're not human. Not like you or me." Lena blinked, trying to process the impossible words coming out of his mouth. "What do you mean, not human?" The man's eyes flickered with a hidden emotion, something darker, something ancient. "They're not of this world. They exist in the spaces between realities. They control the flow of time and memory, manipulating it to keep us from ever remembering who we truly are. But we have a chance now, Lena. A real chance." She shook her head, still not fully understanding. Her mind was racing, her thoughts scattered. She had never believed in things like this. Alternate realities, beings that could control time and memory. Yet, as she stood in the decaying library with this man, everything she had known about her world seemed to be unraveling. What was real anymore? "Are you saying they've been doing this for centuries?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Erasing our memories over and over again?" The man nodded slowly. "Yes, and each time they do, we forget who we are, but we keep coming back. Every lifetime. Every time, we find each other again, and they can't stop us. But they try. They always try." Lena's mind reeled as the implications of his words sank in. She had been here before. She had lived this life before. But who had she been? What had she done in the past? And why couldn't she remember? Why am I the one who remembers now? She asked, her voice cracking. Why not you? Because you're different, the man said simply. You're the key. You've always been the one to remember. The one to break the cycle. But there's something more. Something you still don't understand about yourself. About us. Lena's heart thudded painfully in her chest. What am I supposed to do with all of this? How can I stop it? The man's gaze softened and he stepped closer, his voice tender. You've already started, Lena. Just by being here, just by remembering a piece of your past, you've already taken the first step. Together we can find the answers. We can stop them. But we need to act quickly. The urgency in his voice made Lena's stomach drop. What happens if we don't? Everything, the man said. His eyes dark with resolve. If we don't stop them now, they'll erase everything. They'll keep us trapped in this cycle forever. You'll forget again, and I'll be forced to search for you over and over. But I won't give up on you, Lena. I won't let them take you from me again. Lena's breath caught in her throat as she looked into his eyes. There was a rawness in his expression, a depth of emotion that made her feel something she hadn't in a long time, a sense of connection. But how could she trust him? How could she trust any of this? I don't even know who I am anymore, she whispered, her voice breaking. How am I supposed to know who you are? You will, the man said softly, his hand reaching out to gently touch her face. You already do. The touch of his hand sent a jolt of electricity through Lena, a sensation that felt both alien and familiar. It was as if her very soul recognized him, even if her conscious mind couldn't yet make sense of it. She closed her eyes, trying to grasp onto something, anything, that could help her make sense of the madness surrounding her. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I know, he whispered, his voice full of tenderness. But you're not alone in this. We'll face it together. We've always been together, Lena. And we always will be. Lena opened her eyes to meet his gaze, the fear still there, but also something else. Something she couldn't name but felt deep in her chest. She didn't understand everything yet, how they were connected, what they had been through, or even how they could possibly stop this enemy. But one thing was certain, she couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when she could feel the pull of their past lives, pulling her toward him, pulling her toward the truth. Okay, she said softly. I'll do it. I'll fight with you. A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corners of his lips, a look of relief and gratitude. But as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by a look of quiet determination. Good, he said. Now we just have to find the others. Lena furrowed her brow. Others. There are others like us, the man explained. Others who remember. Together we can break the cycle. But we need to find them, and fast. The weight of his words hung in the air, and for the first time since stepping into the library, Lena felt a spark of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't alone in this. Perhaps there was a way out of the cycle. But as the man turned to lead her deeper into the library, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into the heart of the storm. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. Chapter 8. The Hidden Truth. Lena followed the man through the labyrinthine corridors of the abandoned library. The air grew heavier with every step, thick with the scent of mildew and decay. The flickering lamps cast long shadows on the walls, their glow barely enough to illuminate the pages of books left strewn across the floor, their pages torn and forgotten. The deeper they went, the more it felt like the library itself was alive, breathing, watching them. Lena's heart beat faster as the man led her through a narrow door at the end of the hallway. It opened with a loud creak, revealing a hidden chamber beneath the library, one that hadn't seen daylight in what seemed like centuries. The room was unlike anything Lena had ever seen before. Shelves lined every wall, not with books, but with strange, glowing artifacts. Some were large, others small, and all of them hummed with an eerie energy. In the center of the room was a stone pedestal, upon which sat an ancient-looking device. The device was unlike anything Lena could have imagined. Its metallic surface shimmered in the dim light, covered in symbols she couldn't understand. "This is where it all begins," the man said, his voice somber. He turned to face her, his eyes filled with intensity. "The device on the pedestal is a key, Lena. A key to understanding everything. It's been here for centuries, hidden away by those who tried to keep the truth from us." Lena's mind raced, trying to piece together the strange reality she was now part of. Memories were beginning to flood back, bits and pieces of things she didn't fully understand, glimpses of other lives, other versions of herself, of him. But nothing made sense. She needed answers, and the device on the pedestal seemed like the answer she had been searching for. "You said there are others like us," she said, trying to grasp onto some semblance of clarity. "Who are they? What do they know?" The man walked towards the pedestal, running his fingers lightly over the surface of the device. "They're the ones who remember like us. They've been hiding just as we've been, waiting for the right moment to unite. We need them, Lena. Together we're stronger. And together we can break the cycle once and for all." Lena's gaze never left the device. There was something about it, something that felt connected to her, something that tugged at the very core of her being. The symbols on its surface seemed almost familiar, like fragments of a dream she could almost grasp, but not quite. "What does it do?" she asked, her voice filled with awe and a trace of fear. "It's what they've been hiding from us," the man said, his tone growing darker. "It's the source of their power, the power to erase memories, to control time. And it's what will bring everything to an end. It will reveal the truth, Lena. It will expose them for what they really are." Lena took a hesitant step forward. "How do we use it?" The man turned to face her. "We need to unlock it. But there's something I haven't told you. Something you need to understand before we go any further." Lena's stomach churned, sensing that whatever he was about to say would be the final key to unraveling this twisted reality. She nodded, waiting for him to continue. "You were never supposed to remember," he said quietly. "You were supposed to be like everyone else, oblivious, living in the cycle, unaware. But something about you, something about the way your soul is connected to mine, it's different. You're the anomaly, Lena, the one who can break free. And that's why they're hunting you. They'll stop at nothing to keep you from unlocking the truth." Lena took a step back, her mind spinning. "Why me? Why am I the one who can do this?" The man's expression softened, and he took a deep breath. "Because we've done this before, Lena. Many times. And in every lifetime, you've always been the one to wake up first. To remember. Fight. This is why we're here, why we've been brought together again. It's fate, Lena. You and I were always meant to find each other." His words settled over her like a heavy weight. She wanted to deny them, to push them away, but deep down she felt the truth in his words. She had been searching for something her entire life, something she couldn't name. And now, in this forgotten corner of the world, she had found it. The man reached out to her, his hand trembling slightly as he touched her cheek. "You're not just remembering the past. You're remembering the future too. You're the one who can see through time. And if you can unlock that part of yourself, we can defeat them. We can break the cycle forever." Lena stared at him, her mind struggling to process everything. "How do I unlock it? How do I remember all of this?" The man smiled softly, but his eyes were filled with sadness. "You've already started. The key is within you, Lena. The memories, the power, it's all inside you. You just have to trust it." His hand lingered on her cheek for a moment longer before he turned back to the pedestal. Lena watched as he began to trace the symbols on the device, his fingers moving with a practiced ease. She couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about her life, was crumbling away, piece by piece. But in its place, something else was growing. Sense of purpose. A sense of connection. It was as if she was becoming the person she was always meant to be. Someone who could fight back, someone who could take control of her own fate. The man's fingers brushed over the final symbol, and the device hummed to life, its glowing surface shifting and changing before her eyes. Lena's breath caught in her throat as a soft melodic sound filled the room, like a key turning in a lock. The device was unlocking itself. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the sound stopped. The device's surface became still, its light fading away. But Lena could feel the change. It was as though the room had shifted, the very air around them crackling with energy. The man turned to face her, his expression now one of quiet triumph. "It's done," he said softly. "The truth is ready to be revealed. Are you ready to see it?" Lena's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't hesitate. She had come this far. She had to know the truth. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm ready." And in that moment everything changed. Chapter 9: The Truth Unveiled. The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of energy that now seemed to pulse through the walls. Lena's heart raced, her breath shallow with anticipation as she stood before the man and the mysterious device that had, for so long, been shrouded in darkness. She felt the weight of the moment settling over her, like a veil slowly being lifted from her eyes. Every fiber of her being was alert, waiting. The man, standing beside her, reached out to touch her shoulder lightly, grounding her in the moment. His touch was firm, reassuring. "This is it, Lena," he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet reverence. "The truth is within you. It always has been. It's just a matter of unlocking it." She nodded, unable to speak. Fear, excitement, and an overwhelming sense of purpose all coiled within her chest. It was as if something inside her was waking up, something ancient and powerful. It felt as though the air itself was charged with possibility, a future she had never imagined now within her grasp. Slowly, the device before her seemed to respond to the energy in the room. The symbols that had once been faintly glowing now blazed with light, each one flashing in quick succession, as though they were coming alive. The walls around them seemed to pulse in rhythm with the device, the floor beneath their feet vibrating ever so slightly. Then, as if the device had reached its climax, the symbols faded completely, and a deep, resonant sound filled the room. It was not something Lena could hear with her ears alone. It was a sound that reverberated through her entire being, as if her very soul was vibrating in response. The world around her seemed to blur as memories not just of this life, but of countless others, flooded into her mind. She saw flashes of faces, names, and places she had never been. She felt the weight of years, of centuries, passing through her like a river of time itself. Each fragment of memory was like a shard of glass, sharp and fragmented, but when pieced together they formed a picture, her picture, the real her. And then, as the flood of memories reached its peak, Lena saw him. The man, her companion, her protector, standing at her side in every life she had ever lived. He was always there, always watching over her. He had been her constant, her anchor in every incarnation, every reality. But there was something more, something deeper that she now understood. He wasn't just a part of her past. He was a part of her soul. The realization struck her with a force that made her knees tremble. He was more than just a protector, more than just a fellow soul caught in the cycle. He was her counterpart, the missing piece of her existence. She had known him in every lifetime, in every version of herself, even if she didn't remember. But there was more, so much more. Lena saw them, the enemies who had erased their memories, who had kept them trapped in an endless loop. They were not just beings from another world, but something darker, more sinister. They were the architects of the cycle, the ones who manipulated time and memory to ensure that Lena and her counterpart could never truly remember who they were. They were the ones who feared the power that Lena and the man held, the power to break free, to stop the cycle and end their reign over the lives of others. And there, within the vastness of her memories, Lena understood the true nature of her mission. She wasn't just fighting to remember. She wasn't just fighting for herself or for the man by her side. She was fighting for freedom, the freedom to escape the control of those who sought to rewrite history and manipulate the lives of countless souls. They had been playing God for far too long, and now it was time for the cycle to end. The truth was that she and the man were the catalysts for the final rebellion. They were the ones who could break the chains of memory and time, the ones who could stop the cycle from repeating forever. But to do that, they would need to confront the very forces that had been pulling the strings. They would need to face the enemy and win. Lena gasped as the vision faded, leaving her breathless, her hands trembling. The device on the pedestal before them had stopped glowing, its power now silent, but the room still hummed with an energy she could not explain. The man watched her carefully, his eyes soft with understanding. He knew what she had seen, what she had remembered. He didn't need to ask. There were no words needed between them now. The connection was deeper than anything words could describe. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she saw the full depth of what they were about to face. She was no longer just Lena. She was something more, someone more. She was the key to ending it all. "I remember now," she whispered, her voice steady with resolve. His gaze softened, and he took a step closer, his voice low and urgent. "We're not alone in this, Lena. There are others. Others who have awakened, others who remember just like us. They are scattered, but we can find them. Together, we can unite the fragments of the past and fight back." Lena nodded, the weight of their mission settling on her shoulders. It was no longer just about surviving. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully theirs, their memories, their lives. "We'll find them," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll stop them." For a moment they stood there, the two of them, staring at each other across the room. The man who had been her protector, her partner, her counterpart, and the woman who had just discovered the power she had within her. They were no longer just fighting to remember. They were fighting to reclaim everything that had been stolen from them. And the journey ahead was going to take everything they had. Chapter 10: The Final Battle. The days following Lena's revelation were a blur of preparation and planning. The weight of the truth had settled over her like a mantle, heavy but empowering. She and the man, now united in their shared purpose, had spent countless hours studying the ancient texts and artifacts scattered throughout the hidden chamber. There were others like them, others who had begun to remember, and they would need every ally they could find. As the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, Lena realized the scope of what they were about to do. They were not simply fighting for themselves anymore. They were fighting for the future, fighting to free those still trapped in the cycle, to give them the chance to remember. They were fighting for the chance to stop time from repeating, to end the grip that the enemies had on the world. But time was running out. The enemies, the ones who had manipulated them all, were closing in. They had known this moment would come. They had been waiting for it. And now they were preparing to strike, to prevent the two of them from ever reaching their full potential. Lena could feel it, an oppressive, invisible presence moving in the shadows, always watching, always just out of reach. It was the calm before the storm, and yet it seemed as though the storm had already begun. The man turned to her, his expression grave but resolute. "We have to act now. If we don't, they will keep the cycle going, and they will erase everything we've worked for." Lena nodded, her breath steady despite the growing tension in the air. She had already made her decision. There was no turning back. "We've prepared as much as we can. Let's end this." Together they gathered their allies, those few who had managed to wake up and remember, those who had been scattered across the world, hidden in plain sight. They were ready to fight, ready to take back control. They were the last hope, the final rebellion, and they knew what was at stake. They were prepared for whatever the enemy threw at them. As the day of the final battle approached, Lena felt the weight of her past lives crash down on her all at once. She saw the faces of the people she had once been, warriors, scholars, healers, and more. She had lived through centuries, always searching for this moment, always searching for him. And now, she had finally found the strength to confront the cycle head-on. The battle would not be fought with weapons, but with the truth that would shatter the illusion the enemies had built, the truth that would free the people trapped in the web of lies. The battlefield was not a physical place. It was everywhere. It was in the streets, in the memories of those who had forgotten, in the hearts of those who had been blinded. Lena and her allies were not fighting for territory. They were fighting for the truth to be revealed. In the heart of the city, where the enemy's influence was strongest, the final confrontation began. Lena, the man, and their companions moved through the shadows, each step bringing them closer to the heart of the enemy's lair. They had to reach the core, the source of the power that kept the cycle alive, the device that controlled everything. They reached the grand hall at the center of the city, the place where everything had started. The air inside the hall was thick with dark energy. At the center stood a massive stone pillar, its surface covered in symbols, the same symbols that had appeared on the device in the hidden library. It was here that the enemy had created the cycle, using the power of time and memory to control the fates of those they had enslaved. The leader of the enemy, a being cloaked in shadow, stood before the pillar. His presence radiated malice, his eyes glowing with the power that had corrupted everything around them. He turned to face them, a wicked smile creeping onto his lips. "You think you can end this?" he sneered. "You think you can erase the very fabric of time itself? You have no idea what you're up against." Lena stepped forward, her heart steady as she locked eyes with the enemy. "We're not erasing time," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "We're restoring it." The man moved beside her, his gaze never leaving the enemy. "It's over. The cycle ends today." The enemy's smile faltered, but then he laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the hall. "You don't understand. You never will. This world, this reality was never meant to be free. It's a fragile thing, held together by the memories we've created. Erase those memories and everything falls apart. There is no future without the past." Lena shook her head, feeling the power of her newfound truth coursing through her. The past is only a shadow of what we truly are. It's the truth we've forgotten that binds us. The truth that we are more than the cycles we've been trapped in. The enemy's form began to waver, his power flickering in the air like a dying flame. He was losing control. With one final unified breath, Lena and the man reached out together, their hands glowing with the energy they had awakened within themselves. They placed their hands on the pillar, feeling the ancient power pulse beneath their palms. The symbols on the pillar began to glow brighter, and the hall shook with the force of the truth being revealed. The enemy screamed, but it was too late. The power of truth, of their combined will, shattered the illusion he had woven, breaking the cycle once and for all. The pillar crumbled, the symbols dissolving into the air like smoke, and the oppressive weight that had clung to the world for so long lifted. The battle was over. As the dust settled, Lena turned to the man beside her. He smiled softly, his eyes filled with a deep, knowing look. "We did it." Lena nodded, her heart overflowing with gratitude and peace. The weight of the centuries had been lifted. They had broken free from the cycle, not just for themselves but for everyone. The world was no longer a prison of forgotten memories. It was a place of possibility, a place where the future could be rewritten by those who had the courage to remember. And as Lena and the man stood together, surrounded by the allies who had helped them, they knew one thing above all else. They had found each other, and they would never again be separated by the forces that had tried to keep them apart. For the first time in countless lifetimes, the future was truly theirs.